It's time for Buster.
Spyro Year of the Dragon released in the year 2000 for the PS1, ending Insomniac Games' run of the Spyro series, meaning, much like Naughty Dog, they would have to create a new franchise for the upcoming PS2. The original plan was going to be a Zelda-like adventure with sticks, but that was scrapped in favor for an outer space platform with a killer lineup of weapons. Ratchet and Clank 1 came out in 2002 for the PS2 and wowed audiences with strange yet delightful creature designs, gunplay that was just as much fun as the exploration, and a satirical storyline focused on the dangers of consumerism. The first game was a decent success, which led to Ratchet 2, Ratchet 3, and Ratchet Deadlock, which all expanded on what 1 brought into the table. Though when Ratchet and Clank games start to come to the PS3, they decide to focus more on fantastical storytelling rather than satirizing corporations. This is a change that has turned some fans off from the newer games, which I completely understand, despite me being okay with the new focus. Fun fact, the first non-Nintendo game I owned was Ratchet and Clank All for One for the PS3. All for One doesn't seem well liked by the fanbase, but I recently replayed a bit of it and found it to be a fun yet linear adventure. I'll admit though, it's probably the nostalgia of why All for One holds a special place in my heart, but even so, it led me to the wide world of games outside of Nintendo, for better or for worse. Let's flash forward to 2016 where I got a PS4 for my birthday. The first game I got with it was Star Wars Battlefront 2015. I hate this game so much. It showcases nearly everything wrong with modern gaming and made me realize why people hate EA. Luckily, a couple months later, the Ratchet and Clank reboot for PS4, based on the upcoming movie adaptation at the time, would be released, which was a much better exposure to next generation gaming than Battlefront 2015. This reboot would be quite the hot topic among audiences, with critics and some fans loving the game as a great revival of Ratchet and Clank, while others decrying it as a betrayal of what the franchise stood for. And of course there's me, Victory Buster, being the devil's advocate for both sides, as I don't think it's an insult, but I also believe it's no masterpiece. Hopefully you'll get what I mean by the end of this analysis that isn't ultimate by any means. The environments are the best looking thing in this game, with planets from the PS2 games blending in well with the aesthetics of the new planets, along with being nice looking areas in general. What does look out of place are the character models. Ratchet, Clank, and Captain Quark look great along with the enemies you fight, but most of the other characters either look uninteresting like the characters in the movie who are so forgettable I forgot their names, or the characters are classic Ratchet characters like Big Al and Skid McBarks brought to HD looking like they just woke up from a bad night at the pub. I think the reason for this odd modern update for the old cast is that the PS2 games had graphical limitations and a more industrial art style compared to the organic and colorful styles of the new Ratchet games. It seems Insomniac didn't tweak the character designs enough to fit the new game, which ends up with these unnatural and plastic looking character models. Unfortunately, the worst character design change is on one of my favorite characters in the series, Dr. Nefarious. Nefarious was a fabulous robot in the past games, and he was turned into an ugly alien for the reboot. You know what's also a big downgrade in this game? The animations. During gameplay they look fantastic, but in cutscenes and dialogue conversations they look static compared to the stretchy and expressive animations of the PS2 games. This sums up the game pretty well, where it's more focused on the gameplay aspects than everything else. So if they want us to focus on the gameplay, let's focus on it. The reboot thankfully keeps the same satisfying gameplay loop found in the previous Ratchet and Clank games and improves upon it. You start off with nothing but your trusty Omni Wrench, but you quickly get new guns and moves to help you combat enemies and do some platforming respectively. Ratchet controls wonderfully, having a nice weight to his moves and jumps compared to the slightly floatier Ratchet in past games. Same goes for the Omni Wrench, which is the best Omni Wrench in the series for how good it feels to swing it. I think part of the reason the Omni Wrench and the other weapons are so fun to use is the sound design. The music levels are very bland orchestral tracks, but the sound effects from firing your weapons to collecting bolts makes the gameplay even more satisfying. Speaking of the weapons, I have some issues with them. There's only one new weapon in this game, that being the Pixelizer, with the rest coming from past games. Then there's the frustration of not being able to get the lost weapon, the Bouncer, which can't be accessed anymore because it was a pre-order bonus they never released to the public, which I blame more on Sony's marketing division than Insomniac Games themselves. Even with those critiques, I still find the weapons in this game fun to use. Personal favorites include the flamethrower weapon, the Pyrocitter, the disco ball that sends multiple shockwaves to enemies called the Proton Drum, and the ever-useful and wacky Groovatron. But just because these are my personal favorites doesn't mean I use the other ones. I actually like all the weapons in this game except the Fusion Grenade, but that's more on the mess side, and it's probably because it's the first weapon you get. Let's not forget one of my favorite aspects of gaming, the upgrade systems. Upgrades make me feel like I'm progressing and getting stronger throughout my playthrough of a video game, and Ratchet and Clank not just has one, but about 4 great upgrade systems. The first 2 systems are fairly traditional, with your health growing the more enemies you give the boot, and using a weapon to grow its own level. The cool thing about these systems is that in New Game Plus, you can get more experience points for yourself and the weapons, upgrading yourself further. Then there's Raretanium, which you can use to further upgrade your weapons in this grid system. And finally, there's the trading cards, which you can get randomly in combat. You need a set of 3 specific cards to get an upgrade, which might seem like a hassle since you can get duplicate cards, but thankfully you can trade those duplicate cards for new cards. This all adds to make one of the most satisfying gameplay loops I've ever experienced in a game, and that's not even touching the level design, which is fun to traverse. Some of these level designs are ripped straight from the original PS2 game, and they're just as good as they were back then. But then you have stuff like Planet Gaspar with this fun jetpack mechanic that complements this surprisingly fun side quest of collecting brains for the scientist. However, there is a weak side to the gameplay, and those are the Clank sections. These mini sections aren't bad, in fact at times they can be a nice pace breaker, but there are times late into the game where you're getting to the groove and having a lot of fun, but then oops, Clank section with a few frustrating puzzles. Other than that, this might be the best playing Ratchet and Clank game yet. However, the story might be one of the worst narratives in a Ratchet and Clank game yet. Ratchet and Clank PS4 is this weird hybrid of the movie story, parts of the 2002 PS2 game story, with a few new elements thrown in there for gameplay purposes. But a majority of the story does come from the movie, to the point of using clips of it for cutscene fodder, and it's not good. Instead of Ratchet being a reluctant mechanic who gets wrapped into this mess of plants being blown up and grows into a more heroic person by the end, the reboot starts with Ratchet being his more nicer self that we would see in Ratchet 2 and onward. Not only does this throw Ratchet's character arc completely in the dumpster, but it's just not entertaining. This isn't the sharp satire of the PS2 era games or the fantastical space adventures of the PS3 era games. This is just a mediocre narrative that DreamWorks pumps out on their off days. A bit of a side tangent, but this, combining with the lackluster cutscene animation and additional film clips, makes this feel like a high-budget license game, which might have been fine if this wasn't a pre-existing game franchise known for its well-done story and characters. There is a good idea with good execution found in this game's narrative, but it's very underutilized, that being the framing device of Captain Quark in prison telling his version of events, which is quite clever for both a movie tie-in game and a reboot of the series. There's a lot of things holding Ratchet and Clank on the PS4 back, like the mediocre movie it's based on and a few oof-worthy character models and animations, but the actual gameplay of the game is fantastic and deserves to be attached to a more creative story instead of a disposable kids movie narrative. To give you an idea of how much I enjoyed the gameplay of this title, I played this game from start to finish 3 times within the first year it came out, which I never do of a video game unless it's a Pokemon game. But even if I did enjoy the gameplay a lot, I cannot deny the flaws the rest of the game has. And that, my friends, is what we call Nuance 101. You can like something but acknowledge its flaws, and you can dislike something and acknowledge its positives. Anyway, Rift Apart looks pretty good. Can't wait for that.